Well, let's turn to birds. Birds are probably, in some respects, the ultimate engineering challenge because they fly and man couldn't, right? And we learned a lot about flying by looking at them. Got some misguidance because we don't have the facilities they have. And I suppose the Wright brothers succeeded because they somewhat ignored what the birds and went at from scratch. We could spend a lot of time going through the architecture of the bird, but as we do, we would discover that every detail of the bird has been engineered for flight. Every detail. Things you never even thought of. The skeletons are lightweight. Many of them have hollow bones to save weight. Do you understand what an aeronautical engineer does to save weight? It's been done here. The fulcrum is fused, which has a couple of examples that helps absorb the shock of the wing flapping. It also helps him breathe, because he's got some breathing problems. We'll come to the breathing problems in a minute. He lays eggs because carrying the young would make him too heavy. That's the reason birds lay eggs, because it's external to their flight frame. The reproductive organs atrophy when it isn't in breeding season. They show up when they're needed, and they atrophy to minimal when they're not needed. The physiology gets even more complicated. The birds have a highly intense metabolism. They have a high body temperature, 104 to 108 degrees Fahrenheit is typical. They have lungs that open at each end. And by the way, the feathers have a lot more to do than just flying. They're designed to keep warm, to control the body heat. The lungs are open at each end to have a flow through. We don't have that. They breathe 450 breaths per minute compared to our nominally, say, 30. They have larger hearts if they're high altitude birds. Their hearts beat from 400 to 1,000 beats per minute compared to our 160. So-called, it's what, 20 times or more? The feathers, we could spend an evening talking about the engineering that goes on in a feather. They're there for our aerodynamics. The bird can control each one in 3 dimensions, not just like our aircraft do with flaps and stuff. They also control the body heat, which is critical. We could go through the feet, but to give you the quick summary of the feet, each bird has feet that are specifically designed for his particular lifestyle, whether it's in the water, under the water, what he's going after, whether he's got to dig, whatever, he's designed for it. And it's specifically designed for each bird. So we should take, and let's talk a little bit about the beaks. We go through all kinds of beaks. Here's the parrot beak, or actually it's a kestrel, I guess. It's designed for pulling apart the prey that's too large to swallow. And its hooked appearance is typical of all birds of prey. And the next one is the flamingo. It's got a curved beak for filtering small plants and animals from the surface water, ponds and so forth, in which the beak is submerged, and then the bird pumps the lower bill against the upper, and the food's drained out in sort of a sleeve-like structure attached to the upper wall. And then you have the curlew, which is adapted for probing the shoreline for worms and such. And then you've got the parrot, which is a whole other thing, because he's designed for cracking nuts and eating fruit and that sort of thing, and so forth. And then you have others. They have few birds have teeth, so they can screen out the small things. But let's take the most interesting of them all. We'll just take one in detail. Let's take the woodpecker. Have you ever watched a woodpecker? These guys are astonishing. There's things about them that I never realized. They obviously have a very, very strong beak. That's just the beginning of his problems. His pounding is so hard that he'll lose his eyeballs if he doesn't close them. Seriously. He closes his eyes. He has special cartilage between his beak and his head to help absorb the shock. So he goes home without a headache, huh? His tail feathers are designed to be a tripod with his 2 legs to help brace him for the shocks, okay? They're designed for that. Unlike most birds which have 3 in front and 1 in back in terms of his toes, his are 2 and 2 so he can grip the bark of the tree better. He's designed for what he does. Now here's the wild one. He has a very unusual tongue because his tongue is longer than his beak because it's got to go inside in these tunnels to try to get the larva that he's after. So his tongue is incredibly long. has barbs on the end to grab what he's trying to grab. These larvae don't want to come out of that tunnel. And it also has a glue that the larva sticks to but doesn't stick to his tongue. Man, that takes some chemical engineering. You follow me? That's just the beginning of it. The European green woodpecker has a tongue that goes down the throat, out the back of the neck, around the back of the skull, beneath the skin, and over the top between his eyes, terminating just below the eye socket. Okay? These guys are designed for what they do. Now, I had hoped to get more time to do a little more research, but the more research I've done, I gather from the reading I've done, they still have no idea how birds migrate. They have studied magnetism, they've studied pressure analysis, currents, temperature. There's all kinds of studies that have hints here and there, but to net it out for you, I personally have not encountered, I welcome any rebuttals to the contrary, but I have not found any reliable documentation that explains how birds can go 25,000 miles from birth to where they need to go, and how they do it is a mystery still to this day. I want to tell you about just one. It's my favorite for a number of reasons. That's the Siberian plover, the golden plover as he's called. A little tiny bird, little tiny guy. And he does an interesting thing. The golden plover, here's his flight plan. His flight time is along the bottom in days. The weight of the bird is on the left scale. His fuel consumption is on the right scale. And he starts in Alaska and he goes to Hawaii. Now, what makes this particular flight interesting is that there's no rest stops. There's no place to rest between Alaska and Hawaii. That's just the beginning of his problems. He weighs 130 grams, okay? He is going to need a lot of fuel to do 250,000 wing flaps to get from Alaska to Hawaii. So the way he does it, he prepares for his trip by gaining some weight. And he will put on an additional, 70 grams for fuel, okay? And you can calculate his fuel expenditure, and when you do that, you discover something very, very interesting. It takes 88 hours to get from Alaska to Hawaii, and he's got enough fuel so that he crashes into the sea in 72 hours. Except there's something else. If he didn't do anything else, he wouldn't make it. He doesn't have enough fuel to go 88 hours. He only has enough fuel to go 72 hours. But each year, he makes it to Hawaii. How does he do that? He makes it by flying in formation. By flying in formation, the ones that aren't the lead are saving fuel, and they trade off. You ever wonder what... You guys that race cars, you know what drafting is, right? That's what the birds do. I never knew why birds always fly in this V formation. They're drafting, what we would call in car racing, drafting. And they save about 20% of their fuel that way. In fact, the plover arrives in Hawaii with 6.8 grams margin for headwinds, okay? So you can tell I'm kind of a nerd. I got this stuff from Werner Gittin. I was just fascinated. I made little charts and stuff. You get a great insight. I do a lot of my stuff late at night or real early in the morning. I come down to breakfast. Nan's made eggs, whatever. Let me show you. And I got these charts and the curves and the equations and so forth. And I'm showing her. She looks at it right away and says, gee, that's interesting. That's just like us, isn't it? I says, what? We can't make it alone either. She cut through all the equations, all the stuff for the application. See, you and I can't make it alone either. That's why we have fellowship. That's why the Scripture says we should not forsake the assembling together. We have diverse gifts, and we each need. If you're not exercising your spiritual gift, you're defrauding the body. But it's so characteristic. I'm all wrapped up in the equations, the numbers. She cuts right through it. Okay. She answers the so what question, right? Right there. That's my bride.